a small idea that I think, to be honest with you, I don't have an answer. No, honestly, I don't have an answer to this question. I have ideas that might reconcile it, but every time I thought about this, the thinking that I had an answer, another idea came in my mind, which was of the other hand variety, which dispelled what I thought may have kind of determined which side of the scale this would fall on. But I'm just going to put it out there, and sometimes, as the old expression goes, Sheilat chacham chatzi tshuvahi, that sometimes the wisest answer is a question, right? So, okay. Sukkot is the conclusion of the cycle of Jewish holidays. Jewish holidays of a biblical nature are generally broken down into two categories. There are Chagim, and there are Yamim Noraim. The Chagim are the Jewish festivals which we call pilgrimage festivals. In Islam, they are required, every Muslim is required to undertake a pilgrimage to the 7 holy sites. Do not ask me to recite all of the 7. I don't know them. I know about 4 of them. I keep forgetting. But that is called a Hajj. The word Hajj comes from the word Chag. A Chag is a pilgrimage festival of which in the biblical tradition there are 3 of them. The first being Pesach, the second being Shavuot, the third, the final one, being what we're celebrating here today, that being Sukkot. The other holidays in Jewish tradition of a biblical nature are very well known to us as well. They were just last week, that being Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But they are not Chagim. On Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we do not say Chag Sameach, because they are not Chagim. They are not pilgrimage festivals. Each of the pilgrimage festivals in Jewish tradition, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, have a bicameral identity, meaning there are 2 parts to their identities of what we explain about them. For lack of a better term, let's frame it an agricultural and an historical, or if you're more entitled to think this way, an agricultural and a religious explanation. So, on Pesach, what do we celebrate? We know that we celebrate 2 different things. We celebrate first and foremost the exodus of the Israelites out of Egypt from their slavery into freedom. But we celebrate something else. What is the agricultural element or the earthly element to what we celebrate on Pesach? Spring. Springtime. According to the Torah, Pesach must fall out in the spring. The first mitzvah given in the Torah, the 12th chapter of the book of Exodus, so famously so that Rashi, the biblical commentator, asked the question, which he also didn't give an answer to, really. Why doesn't the Torah just begin there, with chapter 12 of the book of Exodus? If the Torah is only meant to be a law book, start with the first mitzvah. And what is the first mitzvah in the Torah? HaChodesh hazeh yeh lechem. Make a calendar. This month will be for you Chodesh HaAviv in the spring to celebrate Pesach. That is the reason why the Jewish calendar is rigged to ensure Pesach will always fall out in the springtime. So much so that when Rosh Hashanah begins to encroach, like this microphone cable on my foot, when Rosh Hashanah begins to encroach closer into Labor Day, you know that coming year is going to be a leap year, which accordingly in the solar lunar calendar of the Jewish tradition means that we go from 12 months of the year to 13 months of the year, effectively pushing Pesach back 3.5 weeks, and as a result, accomplishing that Pesach once again is reconstituted back into the springtime. That's the danger, by the way, of having a lunar element to a calendar, is the degradation of the seasons. It's something that, for those of you who are familiar with the Muslim calendar, know that Ramadan can either fall out in the winter or it can fall out in the summer. It keeps moving, because it has no solar element to it. So on Pesach, we celebrate springtime and the freeing of the Jewish people. It works completely, because spring is a moment of rebirth, and birth, and the freeing of the Israelites from their slavery is a moment of birth too. It is the birth moment of the Jewish people. 7 weeks later, we celebrate Shavuot. Shavuot celebrates the giving of the Torah to the Jewish people on Mount Sinai. It also celebrates the end of the spring harvest, and the beginning of the summer. In other words, when things really begin to form. The summer planting season is the period of formation, when things truly grow into their fullest. The giving of the Torah to the Jewish people is a symbol of us taking something that was planted in the spring and coming into the fulsomeness of our form starting in the summer. Okay. Now we come to Sukkot. Sukkot celebrates, once again, two elements. It celebrates that the Jews wandered in the desert for 40 years. And it also celebrates Chag HaAsif, the great harvest festival. The problem is that while Pesach and on Shavuot, there is no dissonance between the two different themes. On Sukkot, there is a profound dissonance. And I am not sure what message we celebrate. Because as the Israelites wandered in the desert for those 40 years, how did they survive? What did they survive on? What did they eat? Right. Manna, or in Hebrew called man, manna from heaven. What's the story of the manna from heaven? Every morning the Israelites woke up and there was manna in front of their tents and they would collect it. Except on Friday, there were 2 portions of manna for every person. That is one of the reasons why in Shabbat you always have 2 chalot on your table. There's other reasons why, but that's one of them. So the Israelites were sustained in the desert over those 40 years by divine kindness and providence alone. But the agricultural story is the story of us harvesting, of us planting, of us reaping. The story of the harvest festival is not of God giving us anything, but actually of us giving something to God. That by tilling and working and planting and seeding and watering, that we are the ones who redeem the land, we are the ones who feed ourselves and our families, that we starve or we survive by the wit of our minds and the strength of our hands. It is the complete opposite of what we hear about on the religious or the historical message of the Torah regarding Sukkot. If in the Torah, Sukkot is the story of how God sustained the Israelites while they wandered in the desert, the agriculture is the story of us, God doing nothing for us, of us looking after everything ourselves. To be fair, there's no answer to this, even to this very day. And the reason why is because the Jewish world, particularly in Israel, but yes, elsewhere in the Jewish world, there is a divide in the Jewish world about the best way that a person should live. On one side, there are those who believe that the optimal existence, the optimal pursuit of a person should be like the Israelites wandering in the desert. As the old joke goes, God will sustain us, right? God will give. You know, what's the old joke? This boy is married, stands nodding his head. He knows the joke. This young yeshiva student, soon to be rabbi, is engaged to be married, and the father of the girl sits down and meets with him. He says, Mazel tov, it's wonderful. He goes, how do you plan to support yourself? And he says, well, God will provide. So the boy leaves the house. He goes in and talks to his wife, the father of the bride, and the mother says, well, what do you think of the boy? He says, he's a very nice boy. He thinks I'm God. So the idea, and there's a segment of the Jewish world that believes that we should pursue divine things and rely on God to send manna from heaven. And there's another part of the Jewish world that believes the second story of Sukkot, which is, if you don't plant, there will be nothing to harvest. That we don't sit there and rely on God to give us things, because God has already given us all the miracles that we need to make our lives better. Eyes and mouths, hands and legs, and intelligence. I'm not sure what the answer is in reconciling these two elements. You could say you need both. That's a possible answer. The issue is that I think they're so diametrically opposed that I don't believe it's paradoxical. On the other hand, Jewish tradition has armed every Jew with the unique capacity of holding two opposing ideas in their minds at the same time. And so I think perhaps the beauty of Sukkot, as we close off the calendar of our Chagim, of the Jewish holidays, is feeling that tension within ourselves of wanting God to do things for us, waiting for God to drop things from heaven, and then the burden of us going and doing it ourselves. There's a part of every human being who wants to be taken care of. A part of every human being, no matter how old we are, we want to be looked after. And then there's another part of us that wants to be in control and in charge. Maybe one element of Sukkot reminds us and explains how we want to be cared for, but ultimately we know that the holiday of the great harvest, that the harvest only comes if we're the ones who plant the seeds. We should all be blessed with the year of many seed plantings and much to harvest. Chag Sameach, everyone.